The air in the grand hall wasn't just scented with cedar and winter roses. It tasted like the end of my world. It was thick and cloying, coating my throat until I could barely swallow. I stood pressed against the cold stone wall, a shadow among shadows, where the flickering light from the iron sconces didn't dare to reach. 3 months. It had been 3 months since my world shattered into jagged and visible pieces. 3 months since the words that still echoed in the silent chambers of my heart. Lycus Thornwood, I reject you as my mate. And just like that, the future I'd dreamed of vanished. I became Alara Vance, the Forsaken Omega, a ghost in my own life, sorting herbs in the healing halls, overlooked and dismissed. But I hadn't come to this coronation to mourn the past. I'd come because of a secret, a whisper in the dark that could doom us all. 2 nights ago, while seeking the comforting scent of night-blooming jasmine that reminded me of my lost mother, I'd heard them. Hidden behind the marble pillars of the East Garden, I'd frozen. Their voices, low and venomous, slithered through an open window from the royal chambers. The Northern Sentinels are loyal to tradition, not to him, a woman's voice, smooth as silk and sharp as a dagger, had hissed. When the rogue attack happens during the post-coronation hunt, they'll be too slow to react. The crown will fall and rise on the correct head. A man had grunted in agreement. I fled, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. They were planning to kill the Alpha King, not in a challenge, but in cold-blooded deceit. And the most terrifying question of all, was his own intended Luna, the radiant Selene Ravenwood, part of the plot? Now I watched her. Selene was a vision in moonstone silk, gliding down the aisle towards the throne where he sat, King Kalen Blackwood. Even from my hidden corner, his presence was a physical weight. He wasn't just a king. He was a force of nature carved into human form. Dark hair, eyes like storm clouds, and a stillness that felt more dangerous than any movement. He was a legend, and I was about to gamble my fragile existence to save him. My fingers trembled against the small, folded square of parchment in my pocket. 8 words, scrawled again and again until my hand ached. The coronation is a death trap. Run. Getting it to him seemed impossible, but as the ceremonial horns blared and every eye fixed on Selene's perfect procession, I saw my only chance. This was it. Move now or live with the blood of a king on my conscience. I slipped from the shadows, a wraith in a simple gray dress, weaving through the enraptured crowd. My heart hammered so loudly, I was sure the entire hall could hear it. Each step towards the dais felt like walking towards my own execution. I made it halfway before a hand like iron clamped around my arm. A guard, his face a mask of stern duty. Omega, you are not permitted here. Turn back. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. This was over before it began, but then I looked up, meeting his eyes, something an Omega should never do, and let him see the raw, unvarnished terror in mine. Please, I whispered, the word cracking. A message for the king. It's life or death. People will die tonight if he doesn't get it. For a second, his grip faltered. He saw something real in my desperation. And then, a voice cut through the ceremonial chant, silencing the very air in the room. It was a voice of absolute authority, calm and yet commanding every particle of attention. Let her approach. The guard's hand fell away as if burned. Every head in the grand hall turned. King Kalen Blackwood was looking directly at me. His storm cloud eyes pinned me in place, stripping away the shadows I clung to. The crowd parted like a sea, creating a path that felt miles long. My legs, made of water and fear, carried me forward. I climbed the 3 steps to the dais, dropped into the lowest bow, my forehead nearly touching the cold stone. I couldn't look at him. I simply extended my trembling hand, the folded note a tiny, damning white flag. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty, but you must read this, now." I felt the note leave my fingers, a faint brush of his skin against mine that sparked a strange thing in my blood. I heard the soft rustle of parchment unfolding. The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear the blood roaring in my own ears. It stretched, second after agonizing second. The entire kingdom held its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The ceremonial warmth was gone, replaced by a blade of ice. "Who are you?" I dared to lift my head. His expression was still regal, impassive, but his eyes were a brewing tempest. They saw me, truly saw me, for the first time. "No one of importance, Your Majesty," I managed to choke out. "Just someone who heard a whisper in the dark and couldn't stay silent." His gaze snapped up from the note, sweeping over the crowd, over the smiling Celine, over the ranks of northern sentinels standing proudly by the door. The calculation in his eyes was terrifying. He believed me. And in that moment, I realized with a sickening lurch, I hadn't just delivered a warning. I had just lit the fuse. The trap was still set, and now the hunters knew their prey was alerted. King Kalen's jaw tightened. He rose to his full height, his voice echoing off the ancient stones. "The coronation is suspended. Guards, seal the hall. No one leaves." Chaos erupted, not from the doors, but from the walls. The moment the king's command left his lips, the eastern wall itself exploded inward with a deafening, monstrous roar. The world became noise and terror and flying stone. A chunk of masonry crashed where I'd been standing seconds before. I was on the ground, my shoulders screaming in pain, scrambling blindly for cover behind the massive oak throne. Screams, real, raw screams of terror ripped through the hall, replacing the dignified murmurs. Through the dust and smoke pouring from the gaping hole in our world, they came. Not border rogues, but disciplined warriors in dark, nondescript armor, faces obscured. They moved with a chilling coordination, slicing into the panicked crowd. This was no mere assassination. This was a culling. I saw King Kalen. No, Kalen in that moment was not a king, but a storm given flesh. His ceremonial robes were gone, shed like a second skin to reveal the warrior beneath. A blade was in his hand, and he met the first wave of attackers not with defense, but with annihilation. He was beautiful and terrifying, a dance of lethal grace. 2 men fell before they could lift their weapons. A third was disarmed and rendered unconscious in a move too fast to follow. But there were too many. They were everywhere. The royal guard formed a living shield around the dais, but the attackers had planned for this. They split the crowd, creating panic that worked as their ally. I saw an elderly Delta trampled. A young Beta trying to shield his mate was cut down from behind. My breath hitched. This was the trap, and my warning had only changed its shape, not stopped it. I had to move. Cowering here meant death when they overran the dais. I made to slip towards a side corridor, but a glint of steel caught my eye. An attacker had broken through, his focus not on the king, but on Commander Rylan, the grizzled leader of the Northern Sentinels, who was trying to rally his men. The assassin's blade was aimed at Rylan's unguarded back. Without thinking, my body moved. I launched myself forward, my voice tearing from my throat in a raw scream. "Commander, behind you!" Rylan spun, his warrior instincts overriding shock. Steel met steel with a screech that echoed in my bones. He was alive, parrying the blow, entering the deadly dance. But my scream had painted a target on me. I felt the air shift behind me a second too late. An arm like a band of steel locked around my waist, yanking me off my feet. The smell of sweat and something chemically bitter filled my nose. "Clever little Omega," a voice growled in my ear, hot and foul. "Time to be quiet." I thrashed, biting down hard on the hand that clamped over my mouth. I tasted leather and blood. The man cursed, his grip loosening for a vital second, and then he made a wet, choking sound. The crushing pressure vanished, and I fell to the stone floor as his body collapsed behind me. Standing over him, a ceremonial dagger now stained a shocking crimson, was Luna Celine. Her perfect composure was gone. Her midnight hair was disheveled, her gown torn, but her green eyes were fierce and clear. They met mine for a fleeting second. No warmth, no friendship, but a sharp, assessing look that held a sliver of something like respect. Then she was moving again, joining the defenders, fighting with a skill that spoke of secret training. She wasn't the orchestrator, or she was an incredibly brave actress. "Fall back to the inner chambers," Commander Ryland's voice boomed over the din. "Protect the civilians. Guard the bottleneck." The crowd, a river of panic, surged towards the narrow doorways. It was a disaster in motion. Too many bodies, not enough space. They would be slaughtered in the crush. Someone had to guide them, and the guards were fighting for their lives. The only person unarmed, small enough to weave through the chaos, and who knew the castle's hidden veins, was me. Gathering a shred of courage I didn't know I possessed, I ran to the nearest panicked cluster. "This way," I yelled, grabbing the arm of a sobbing Omega girl. "Not the main doors, the servants' passage. Follow me." I didn't wait for agreement. I simply moved, acting on instinct, and like lost ducklings, they followed. I led them away from the grand hall, into the colder, narrower stone corridors used by staff. "Stay low, move quickly, to the eastern gardens." "Who are you to lead us?" a portly Delta man demanded, fear making him aggressive. "I'm the one who knows the way out," I snapped, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Now move, unless you want to die debating protocol." He moved. We turned corner after corner, my memory of fetching herbs for the healers creating a map in my mind. The sounds of battle grew muffled, replaced by our frantic footsteps and ragged breathing. We rounded a final corner, and my heart stopped. Blocking the path to the garden door were 3 attackers, having had the same flanking idea. They turned, their masked faces tilting in sinister unison. The people behind me gasped, recoiling, trapping us all. The lead attacker chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "Look what wandered into our net, a little pack of frightened sheep." I was cornered. We all were. With a final desperate surge, I did the only thing left. I screamed. Not a scream of fear, but a sustained, piercing cry for help, a beacon in the stone maze. The attacker raised his blade. "No one can hear you, little forsaken one." A blade erupted from the center of his chest. He looked down, confused, before crumpling to the ground. Behind him stood Commander Ryland, bloodied but standing, 2 royal guards at his flanks. They dispatched the remaining 2 with brutal efficiency. Ryland looked at me, then at the 20 dozen terrified souls huddled behind me. "Smart," he grunted. "The garden door is clear. Get them out. We'll hold this corridor." "The king," I started, "is alive. Now go." I didn't need to be told twice. I ushered my group through the small, hidden door into the blessedly cold, open air of the night. The moon was high and indifferent. "Run for the village. Don't stop. Don't look back." The Omega girl I'd first grabbed clutched my hand. "You're coming, right?" I looked back at the castle, at the lights and smoke pouring from the shattered hall. The sounds of combat still rang out. Kaylin was in there. Others were wounded, dying. I was a healer's aide. This was what I was meant for, even if the senior healers never believed it. "I have to go back," I said, the words tasting of fate. I pulled my hand away and slipped back into the dark mouth of the passage, leaving safety behind, running towards the heart of the storm. The corridors were a nightmare of smoke, shadows, and the distant, echoing sounds of a dying battle. I moved like a ghost I once was, silent and unseen, twice pressing myself into alcoves as pairs of guards rushed past. The smell of blood and burning wood was now a permanent layer in the air. I wasn't heading for the healing halls. Something, a pull I couldn't explain, drew me back to the grand hall. I had to see. I had to know. When I reached the shattered entrance, the scene was one of grim, hard-won order. The attackers lay still, being disarmed and checked by royal guards. Our own wounded were being tended to, and in the center of it all, standing before his throne as if he had grown roots there, was King Kalen. He was splattered with blood that was not his own. In the dawn's early gray light filtering through the broken wall, he looked less like a man and more like a monument to vengeance and survival. His gaze swept the hall, and then, as if sensing my presence, it found me in the doorway. The world narrowed. The moans of the wounded, the shouts of orders, the scraping of stone, all of it faded into a silent hum. His storm cloud eyes held mine across the carnage. In them, I saw exhaustion, fury, a deep, calculating intelligence, and a question aimed directly at me. He had survived. My warning had been a thread that allowed him to cling to the cliff's edge, and now he knew the face of the thread. A guard with kind eyes eventually guided me not to a cell, but to a quiet, spare room in the administrative wing. I waited there as dawn bled into morning, my mind replaying every second, every choice. Was I a hero or a catalyst, a savior or a fool? The door opened to reveal Commander Rylan. The king will see you now. He led me deep into the castle's heart to a private study overflowing with books and maps. Kalen stood by a window, his back to me, the morning light outlining his broad shoulders. He had washed away the blood, changed into simple, dark clothes, but the battle clung to him in the tight set of his jaw, the way his hand rested near a dagger, even in this safe space. "Your Majesty," Rylan announced, "Ilara Vance." "Leave us," Kalen said, his voice a low rumble. The door shut, and I was alone with the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. "Look at me." The command was quiet, but absolute. I forced my eyes up, past the evidence of his rule on the desk, to meet his gaze. Up close, the legend became a man. Tired, a scar on his cheek, threads of silver in his dark hair, but the power was undimmed, a quiet thunder in the room. "Your name," he stated. "Ilara, Your Majesty. Ilara Vance." "Ilara Vance," he repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "An Omega from the healing halls, forsaken by Lycus Thornwood." He knew. Of course he knew. "Tell me why. Why risk everything for a king you don't know?" The truth was simple. Because it was right, and because I have already lived through the end of my world. I couldn't stand by and watch another end, even if I was just a shadow in it. He studied me for a long moment. "You didn't just stand by, you acted. Your warning, delivered in the most public way possible, forced their hand prematurely. It saved lives. Commander Rylan informs me you also led 20 dozen civilians to safety through passages most nobles don't know exist. Then you returned. Why return?" "I am trained as a healer's aide," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I thought I could help the wounded." "A healer's aide they don't let touch patients because of the rejection." Shame, hot and familiar, fleshed through me. I looked away. "They say forsaken Omedas are unstable, unlucky." What I saw last night was not instability, it was clarity under fire. It was courage when others faltered. He took a step closer. The scent of pine and winter night enveloped me, not as an assault, but as a presence. "The people who dismissed you are fools. This kingdom doesn't run on luck. It runs on loyalty and intelligence. You have demonstrated both in abundance." He turned to his desk, picking up a report. "The conspiracy runs deeper than we thought. It was not just about killing a king. It was about dismantling a kingdom. You are a witness to it, and now a target." My breath caught. A target? Keeping you in the Omega quarters would be a death sentence. He continued, his tone matter-of-fact. I have a different proposal. I need people around me I can trust, people who see truth, not just status. The work would be difficult. You would face resentment, suspicion, and danger, but you would be under royal protection, and you would be useful. He finally looked back at me. I am offering you a position as a royal aide. You would manage communications, help coordinate intelligence, serve as a liaison with the healing halls. Your perspective would be valued. My mind reeled. It was impossible, unheard of. Why? The words slipped out, blunt and bare. Why invite the political storm of elevating a forsaken Omega? A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Because I am tired of storms that only serve to maintain the old, rotten foundations. I need those who can help me build something new. You proved your worth not with a bloodline, but with your actions. The question is, are you brave enough to accept the consequences of being seen? I thought of the healing halls, of being forever on the periphery. I thought of standing in the shadows, holding that note, and choosing to step into the light. This was another choice, a terrifying one. I accept, I said, and the words felt like a vow. I will not make you regret it. Good, he nodded once. Rylan will handle your security and quarters. Rest today. Tomorrow we begin. He moved to the door, but paused. Ilara. Yes, Your Majesty? Last night, in the hall, before the chaos, what made you think I would even notice you? I had no answer. It was just hope. He looked at me, that unreadable depth in his eyes again. It was more than hope. It was like a quiet bell ringing in a silent room. I couldn't not hear it. He left, and I was alone, standing in the eye of the hurricane my life had become, wondering what future that bell was tolling for. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of ink, parchment, and piercing gazes. My new quarters were a world away from the Omega dormitories, a small but private room with a real bed, a desk by a window, and a lock on the door. The symbol of that lock meant more than any luxury. My days were a relentless flood. I learned to decipher patrol reports from the frostbitten northern border, track supply lines for the southern garrisons, and navigate the delicate dance of correspondence between proud, ancient packs. The work was complex, vital, and I discovered a frightening aptitude for it. The skills honed by organizing Foxglove and Comfrey translated perfectly to organizing troop movements and trade agreements. The resentment was a cold, constant draft. Officials who had spent decades climbing the ranks looked at me, the forsaken Omega suddenly at the right hand of power, with naked hostility. Whispers followed me. Political stunt. The king's wounded pet. She'll falter at the first real test. But I didn't falter. I found discrepancies in grain shipment logs that hinted at corruption. I noticed a pattern of minor accidents along a disputed border that suggested deliberate provocation. Slowly, grudgingly, the whispers changed. Annoying but thorough, sharp-eyed that one. Commander Rylan had assigned me a guard, Nisha, a beta female with the watchfulness of a hawk and a dry, unwavering loyalty. She became my shadow and my first hesitant friend in this new world. They hate you because you're a mirror, she said once, as we walked a corridor lined with glaring portraits of past alphas. You show them that everything they think matters, blood, title, who rejected who, means nothing next to what you actually do. The investigation into the attack was a dark undercurrent. Lady Evangeline, Celine's confidant, had been the silk-voiced traitor in the garden. Her confession revealed a nest of nobles, ones who saw Kylen's rule as too progressive, too threatening to their entrenched privileges. They didn't just want a different king, they wanted to unwind time itself, to push Omegas and lower-rank Betas back into silent, subservient corners. My success was a personal affront to their entire world order. Which made me a target. Nisha intercepted 2 gifts, a venomous serpent in a basket of herbs, a note with a crude knife drawing left on my desk. The message was clear: know your place or be removed from it. I refused to shrink. Every threat hardened my resolve. I had been given a chance not just to survive, but to matter. My interactions with Kailen were formal, focused on work, yet layered with an unspoken tension. He treated me with a respect that had nothing to do with my gender or rank, only with my mind. He asked for my opinion and listened, truly listened, sometimes changing course based on my observations. "You see the weave, not just the thread," he remarked once after I'd connected a trade dispute to a drop in Border Patrol morale. Luna Celine was a polite, polished enigma. We exchanged courteous nods. She had fought bravely, saved my life, and her betrothal to Kailen remained, yet there was a frost in the air between them, a distance measured in feet and formal titles. The lunar binding had never been completed. The kingdom held its breath, waiting. And then Rylan delivered the news that sent a chill down my spine, colder than any threat. "The summit with the Eastern Territories is in a week. Their delegation list arrived. Lycus Thornwood is on it." The name hung in the air of my neat new room. Lycus, my past walking back into my present. Nisha's hand went to her weapon. "That's no coincidence. It's a challenge." "It's a test," I corrected, my voice surprisingly steady. "They want to see if his presence will break me, or if the king will sideline me to avoid the scandal. They're testing his commitment to this experiment." Rylan watched me. "The king wanted to deny him entry." "Don't," I said quickly. "That's what they want. It would look like I'm a weakness to be hidden. Let him come. I am not the girl he rejected 3 months ago." And I wasn't. That girl had been defined by a single bond, her worth tied to a mate's acceptance. I was now defined by my actions, my work, the lives I'd helped save. The thought of facing Lycus didn't bring pain anymore. It brought a cold, clear focus. The summit preparations became all-consuming. Seating charts were a diplomatic minefield. I placed Lycus and his father at a middling table, far from the high dais, not out of pettiness, but as a quiet statement of the new order. The day the delegations arrived, I was in the courtyard overseeing logistics. The Eastern contingent rode in, banners flying. And there he was, Lycus, handsome, smug, laughing with his companions. His eyes scanned the bustling yard, passed over me once, then snapped back. His smile froze. He saw me, the simple but well-made dress of a royal aide, the scrolls in my arms, the alert Nisha at my shoulder. He saw me seeing him, not with heartbreak, but with the calm assessment of a professional. I held his gaze for 3 long seconds, then turned back to the stablemaster, dismissing him from my world as thoroughly as he had once dismissed me from his. That night, at the welcoming feast, I stood at my assigned post. Lycus was seated where I had placed him. He watched me all evening, a confused frown on his face. The rejection had been meant to diminish me, to make me disappear. Instead, I was here, in the heart of the king's court, and he couldn't understand it. During a lull in the speeches, I felt it again, that subtle wrongness, a discorded note in the hum of the crowd. My eyes swept the room past nobles and servers. There, a servant refilling wine, his movements too stiff, his path taking him on a slow, deliberate arc towards the king's table. His hand brushed against the inner fold of his tunic. Time didn't slow, it crystallized. I saw the glint, I saw the intent, and without thinking a second, my voice cut through the murmur of diplomacy, sharp and clear as shattering glass. "Guards, the server, he has a blade." Chaos again, but this time it was controlled. Guards converged, not from panic, but from drill. The man was seized before he could take another step, a thin, poisoned stiletto clattering to the floor. Once more, every eye in the hall turned to me, the Omega who saw threats in shadows, the Forsaken One who kept saving the king. And once more, Kailen's stormy gaze found mine across the crowded room. But this time, in his eyes, I didn't just see gratitude or calculation. I saw a dawning, awe-filled realization, and something warmer, something deeper, that made my breath catch and the world tilt on its axis. The fallout from the second assassination attempt was a quiet, seismic shift. The summit continued, but the air was charged with a new tension. Delegates who had viewed me with polite contempt or veiled curiosity now looked at me with wary respect. The king's pet Omega had become the king's keen-eyed sentinel. Whispers now carried a note of fear. I had a gift, or a curse, for seeing what others missed. The conspirators, it seemed, were not so easily deterred. The captured servant was a man with no past, a ghost paid in silver to become a weapon. He revealed nothing before taking his own life with a hidden poison capsule. The message was clear. The rot went deep, and its agents were fanatical. My name would be at the top of their list. Kalen's trust in me solidified into something tangible. He began including me in security briefings with Rylan in his inner circle. My role evolved from organizer of parchments to analyst of threats. I pored over guest lists, supply manifests, and patrol reports, searching for the faintest pattern of disruption. The work was terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I felt essential. It was during one of these late-night sessions in the king's study, maps of the kingdom spread before us, that he asked me a question that had nothing to do with border defenses. "Why did you stay?" he asked, his voice low. The fire crackled in the hearth, the only other sound. "After leading those people to safety, you could have vanished into the forest, started anew. No one would have blamed you." I looked up from a trade route I was annotating. The firelight played across the strong planes of his face, softening the stern lines. "Where would I go?" I said simply. The healing, the protecting, the building, it felt like my purpose. For the first time since my mother died, and since I trailed off, not needing to say Lycus's name. It felt like I had finally found where I was meant to be, even if it was dangerous. He was silent for a long moment, studying me. Purpose is a rare thing to find. Most spend their lives chasing the shadow of it. He leaned back in his chair. "Lycus Thornwood approaches you tomorrow. He requested a formal meeting." A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I kept my face neutral. I expected as much. "You do not have to grant it. I can have him removed from the castle grounds." The offer was a shield, but I had spent too long hiding. "Thank you, Your Majesty, but I will see him. Some ghosts need to be faced in the daylight to truly vanish." He nodded, that flicker of approval in his eyes. "As you wish. Nisha will be outside the door." The meeting was set in a small, sunlit antechamber used for minor audiences. I arrived first, arranging myself behind a simple desk, placing parchments and a quill before me, props of my new authority. When Lycus entered, he filled the room with the scent of sandalwood and entitlement. He was still handsome, but his confidence seemed thinner, stretched over a core of new uncertainty. "Ilara," he began, offering the charming smile that once had made my heart flutter. Now it left me cold. "Delegate Thornwood," I replied, my tone polite and distant. "You requested an audience. How may I assist the Eastern Territories?" He blinked, thrown by the formality. I wanted to speak to you properly. Seeing you here in this role, I realized I may have acted in haste." "May have?" I echoed, allowing a hint of steel into my voice. He shifted, uncomfortable. "The rejection, it was a mistake. I was young, pressured by my father's expectations. I see now the quality you possess. Your standing with the king is impressive. My father believes a formal alliance between our houses could be mutually beneficial." There it was. Not an apology, not regret for the heart he had shattered, a business proposal. My value had finally been appraised and found adequate, not for who I was, but for the political capital I now represented. I looked at him, this boy I had once thought held my future, and felt nothing but a distant pity. "Lycus," I said, abandoning all titles, "you didn't make a mistake. You simply valued the wrong things. You wanted a trophy Omega to adorn your future alpha life. I was never that. I am a healer, an aide, a strategist. I save lives and help guard a kingdom. You rejected the girl who dreamed of a mate. You have no claim on the woman she became." His face flushed with affront. "You are being prideful and foolish. This is an opportunity." "It is an opportunity for you," I cut him off, standing. The movement was smooth, confident. "My opportunity came when I chose to hand a note to a king. I built my life from that choice. I am not interested in dismantling it to become an ornament in yours. The audience is over." He stared, speechless, as I walked to the door. I paused, hand on the handle. "I truly hope you find what you are looking for, Lycus, but you will not find it here." I left him standing in the sunbeam, his offer crumbling to dust at his feet. In the corridor, Nisha fell into step beside me, a smirk playing on her lips. "Sounded definitive." "It was," I said, and a weight I didn't know I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. The last chain of my old life fell away. But the peace was short-lived. That evening, a sealed note, not on official parchment but on rough, common paper, was slipped under my door. Nisha inspected it for poisons before letting me touch it. I broke the seal. "The Forsaken sees too much. The Forsaken must learn to be blind. The next bell that tolls will be for you." It was not signed. It didn't need to be. The conspiracy was sending me a direct message. They were watching, and they were coming. The threat coiled in my room like a venomous serpent, its words staining the air. "The next bell that tolls will be for you." Nisha had doubled the guard on my door and insisted on inspecting my meals herself. Paranoia became my constant companion, a whisper in the back of my mind, with every footstep echoing in the hall, every unfamiliar face in the courtyard. Kalen's reaction to the note was a controlled inferno. He didn't rage. His anger was too cold, too focused for that. He summoned Rylan and his head of intelligence, a wiry, silent man named Theron. "The net tightens, but it also reveals its shape," Kalen said, his finger tracing a line on a map that detailed the noble districts of the capital. "They feel threatened enough by Alara to show their hand. This is an advantage. Use it. Trace the paper, triple the watches on anyone who has voiced traditionalist views against the crown's reforms, and I want a guard on Luna Selene as well." That last order surprised me. "Your Majesty, you suspect Luna Selene?" He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I suspect everyone who stood to gain from my death. Selene's position would have been secured as a widowed Luna, a potential puppet for the conspirators. But she fought that night. She saved your life. I do not think she is the architect, but she may be a piece on the board, unaware of the game being played. We protect all pieces until we know their value." His strategic mind was a formidable thing. In protecting Selene, he was also isolating her, observing her reactions. The summit concluded with tense agreements. The Eastern delegation, including a subdued and scowling Lycus, departed. The castle settled into a wary, watchful rhythm. My work intensified. Kalen began entrusting me with deciphering coded messages from loyalists within other packs, messages that hinted at pockets of dissent growing like mold in the shadows. One rainy afternoon, I was cross-referencing these reports with tax records when I found it. A discrepancy so small it was almost invisible. A minor noble house from the Western Ridge, the House of Vane, had reported a crop blight and received a tax concession. Yet, in the same season, their silver mines, supposedly depleted, had quietly increased shipments to a merchant house with ties to Evangeline's family. "They're not rich. They're funding something," I murmured, my pulse quickening. "What did you find?" Kalen was at my shoulder, having approached silently. I showed him the figures explaining the link. His eyes darkened. Vane. He spoke loudly at the last council about the sanctity of alpha bloodlines and the dangers of elevating lesser ranks. He placed a hand on the back of my chair, leaning over to see the parchment. The scent of him, pine, parchment, rain, was suddenly all around me. "Good work. This is the thread. We pull it and the whole tapestry may unravel." His closeness was a new kind of disturbance, not of fear, but of something warmer, more confusing. I kept my eyes on the figures. "We need to move carefully. If they suspect we know." "We will be the shadows this time," he agreed, his voice a low rumble near my ear. He straightened, and the space felt cold without him there. "Prepare a dossier on House Vane." everything: land holdings, family connections, trade partners for the last 5 years. Leave no stone unturned. The next week was a blur of clandestine research. I became a ghost in the Royal Archives, pulling records under the guise of historical surveys. The dossier grew. House Vane was connected, by marriage or debt, to nearly half of the nobles implicated in the original conspiracy. They were the hidden bank, the silent center. The night before we were to present the findings to the Royal Council, the bell tolled. Not for me. It was the dead of night when the alarm clanged through the castle, not the general alarm, but the specific piercing chime that signaled fire in the royal quarters. I bolted upright in bed, Nisha already at the door, sword drawn. The smell of smoke was faint but acrid on the air. "Stay here," Nisha ordered, but I was already pulling on a robe. "It's the King's Wing," I said, dread icing my veins. We ran into a corridor filled with smoke and rushing guards. The fire was contained to a single room, the secondary royal library, adjacent to Kaelin's private study. Guards were forming a bucket line. Through the open door, I saw flames licking at centuries-old books, consuming the history I had just been studying. And then I saw him. Kaelin, wearing only sleep pants, was directing the effort, his face smudged with soot. He was safe. The relief was so profound, my knees weakened. But as the fire was brought under control, Theron emerged from the study, holding a charred, half-melted metal box. "Arson, Your Majesty," he said grimly. "A simple timed device using lamp oil and a candle. It was placed in the library, but the real target," he gestured to the study door, "it was meant to spread next door, to destroy your study and the documents within." All eyes turned to me. The dossier on House Vane had been on Kaelin's desk. The fire was a message, and a desperate one. They knew we were close. They weren't just threatening me anymore. They were trying to erase the evidence. Kaelin's gaze met mine across the smoke-hazed corridor. In his eyes, I saw the same realization dawning in my own mind. The conspiracy wasn't just in the shadows of the court. It had claws inside the castle. Someone with access to the royal wing set that fire. The bell had tolled. It hadn't been for my life, but for my work. They had tried to burn the truth to ashes. And in doing so, they had made a fatal mistake. They had shown us we were on the right path. The hunt was now a race against time. The acrid scent of burned knowledge lingered in the castle for days, a constant reminder of the boldness of our enemies. The attempted destruction of the dossier had the opposite effect. It hardened Kaelin's resolve and unified his inner circle. The investigation shifted from discreet observation to active pursuit. The charred metal box yielded no clues. It was common smithy work. But the act itself was a clue. Access to the royal wing after hours was severely restricted. Theron, Rylan, and I pored over the guard schedules and servant logs for that night. A name surfaced, again and again: Silas, a junior scribe with access to the secondary library for scroll-copying duties. He had signed out a set of architectural sketches that evening, a plausible reason to be there. Silas was brought in for questioning. He was a nervous, rabbit-faced young beta, sweating profusely. He broke almost immediately. "I didn't want to. They have my sister. They said they'd hurt her if I didn't place the box." He named his contact, a guardsman in the city watch, who was promptly arrested. That guardsman, under persuasive questioning, gave up a name higher up the chain: a steward in the household of Lord Vane himself. The net was closing. We had a direct link from the fire to House Vane. Kaelin decided to act before they could silence another link in the chain. He called an emergency session of the Royal Council, but only invited a select few, loyalists he trusted implicitly, and, pointedly, Lord Vane. The council chamber was tense. Lord Vane, a man with a carefully trimmed beard and cold, calculating eyes, sat perfectly composed. Kaelin didn't mince words.
He laid out the financial discrepancies, the connections to Evangeline, the testimony of the guardsman implicating Vane's steward in the arson plot. Vane listened, a faint, condescending smile on his lips. Circumstantial, Your Majesty, ambitious conjecture spun by non-traditional advisors. His gaze flicked to me, standing slightly behind Kaelin's chair, with Nisha at my side. The word of a frightened guard and a crooked steward against the honor of an ancient house? This is what happens when we let unfamiliar voices whisper in royal ears. It was a masterful deflection, playing to the biases in the room. Murmurs of agreement rippled through some of the older lords. Then Kaelin played his final card. Bring in the witness. The doors opened, every head turned, and walking in, her head held high but her hands trembling slightly, was Luna Selene. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Lord Vane's composure cracked for a single telling second, his eyes widening in shock. Selene walked to the center of the room and curtsied to Kaelin. Your Majesty, Lords of the Council. She took a deep breath. For months, my attendant and friend, Lady Evangeline, spoke to me of the old ways, of the danger the king's reforms posed to our natural order. She said there were those who would act to restore balance. I dismissed it as idle gossip from a traditionalist. I was a fool. Her voice grew stronger. On the night of the coronation attack, after Lady Evangeline was taken, I found a sealed letter in her quarters, hidden in a book of prayers. It was addressed to me, to be opened if she met with misfortune. Selene produced a parchment from her sleeve. This names Lord Vane as the architect of the conspiracy. It details their plan to use the attack to discredit the Northern Sentinels, create chaos, and place a puppet ruler, my cousin, who shares their views, on the throne with me as a figurehead Luna. I was not a conspirator. I was to be a prisoner in gilded silk. She handed the letter to Kaelin, the damning evidence, in Evangeline's own elegant hand. Lord Vane shot to his feet, his face purpling. Lies, forgery, this is a trap set by the king and his Omega spy to purge loyal opposition. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his rage making him reckless. She is the poison, the forsaken one who clouds the king's judgment. In his fury, he had revealed too much. He knew about the note left under my door, information that had never been made public. The room went utterly still. Kaelin slowly rose from his throne, his presence expanding to fill the chamber. How, he asked, his voice deadly quiet, how do you know about the threat made to aid Vance, Lord Vane? That information was known only to my innermost circle and the perpetrator. Vane froze, realizing his mistake. His mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. The game was up. Kaelin nodded to Rylan. Guards moved forward. Lord Alistair Vane, you are arrested for treason, conspiracy to commit regicide, and the attempted murder of a royal aide. Take him to the black cells. His properties are to be seized, his associates detained for questioning. As Vane was dragged away, sputtering denials, the remaining council members sat in stunned silence. The shadowy conspiracy had a face, a name, and was now in chains. The relief in the room was palpable, but it was tinged with a new fear. How many other Vanes were waiting in the wings? After the council disbanded, Selene approached me in an empty antechamber. She looked exhausted, her regal beauty stripped bare to reveal the weary woman beneath her. I owe you an apology, Alara, she said, her voice soft. I allowed prejudice to blind me. I saw you as a disruption, not as what you are, the person who saved the king, and perhaps the kingdom, twice over. Thank you for your silence while I found the courage to come forward. I nodded, accepting her words. You fought that night, Luna Selene. You saved my life. That spoke louder than any rumor. A sad smile touched her lips. The betrothal will be annulled, of course. It was always a political arrangement. Kaelin, he needs a partner, not a pretty symbol. I think he may have already found one. Her gaze was knowing, but not unkind. She inclined her head and left me standing there, her words echoing in the sudden quiet. The conspiracy was broken, its head severed, but as I walked back to my quarters, Nisha a silent shadow, I couldn't shake the feeling. We'd won a battle, but the war for the soul of the kingdom, the war against the darkness of the old ways, was far from over, and my place in that war was no longer that of a hidden aid. I was now a symbol myself, a symbol of change, and symbols make the brightest targets.
Peace, in the wake of Lord Vane's arrest, was a fragile, busy thing. The tendrils of his conspiracy were painstakingly unraveled. Minor nobles swore new oaths of fealty, their loyalty purchased with fear rather than conviction. The castle buzzed with the work of rebuilding trust and securing the realm. My dossier on House Vane became the blueprint for a wider audit of noble houses, a project Kaelin placed under my direction. It was unprecedented authority for an Omega, and the grumbling never fully ceased, but it was now muted, spoken behind firmly closed doors. Kaelin and I fell into a new rhythm. The formal Your Majesty and Aid Vance remained, but the space between us when we worked felt charged with an unspoken understanding. We spent long hours in his study, the fire casting dancing shadows as we planned reforms for the healing halls, my first official proposal, to train Omegas and lower-rank Betas as full healers based on aptitude, not bloodline. He debated points with me fiercely, treating my ideas with a seriousness that was intoxicating. One evening, as I prepared to leave after a particularly grueling session, he stopped me at the door. "Ilara," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "walk with me in the gardens. The night-blooming jasmine is in flower. I'm told it's noteworthy." My heart gave a strange, hard thump. He remembered. He remembered my foolish reason for being in the gardens that fateful night. I simply nodded. The eastern gardens were bathed in silver moonlight. The scent of jasmine was indeed heavy and sweet, a balm after the smell of smoke and intrigue. We walked in silence for a time, the only sounds our footsteps on the gravel path and the distant calls of night birds. "It is peaceful here," he finally said, "a world away from thrones and councils." "It's where everything changed," I replied softly. He stopped, turning to face me. The moonlight etched his features in silver and shadow. "Yes, because a brave soul chose to act from the shadows." He took a breath. "The betrothal to Celine has been formally dissolved. It was agreed by both of us, amicably. She will return to her family's lands with our gratitude and protection." I knew this was coming, yet hearing it made the air feel thinner. "I am glad it was amicable." "It was," he said, his storm cloud eyes searching mine, "because my heart was never in it. It was a union of lineages, not of souls. For decades, I believed that was all a king could hope for, duty over desire. Then you appeared, a forsaken Omega with more courage and clarity than any Alpha in my court. You turned my world upside down not by trying to claim a place in it, but by proving that the place itself needed to change." He reached out, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, and took my hand. His touch was warm, his fingers calloused from sword and pen alike. "I am not Lycus Thornwood. I am not offering you a reconsideration. I am offering you a beginning, not as a king to an Omega, but as Kaelin to Ilara. A partnership, if you will have it, if you will have me." Tears blurred the moonlit garden. This was not a political proposal. It was not about my usefulness or my position. It was about me, the woman who sorted herbs and saw patterns in chaos, who was brave when she was terrified, who valued right over rank. "Kaelin," I whispered, his name a prayer on my lips. I am still a forsaken Omega in the eyes of many, a queen from the shadows. They will call it madness. They will fight it. A fierce, proud light ignited in his eyes. Let them fight. I have spent my reign battling shadows. I would rather battle in the light for something real, with you by my side. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. But only if it is what you want. Your choice, Ilara. Always your choice. In his words, I heard the echo of every choice that had led me here. The choice to listen in the garden, the choice to write the note, the choice to step forward, to come back, to stand my ground. This was the culmination of all those choices, not an ending, but the greatest beginning. I turned my hand in his, lacing our fingers together. The connection felt more binding than any ceremony. My choice, I said, my voice clear and sure in the quiet night, is you. It is us. It is this new world we're building together. He didn't kiss me. The moment was too profound for that. Instead, he brought our clasped hands to his chest, holding them over his heart. I could feel its strong, steady beat through his tunic. A promise. A vow. In the scent of jasmine and under the witness of the moon, the king and the forsaken Omega chose each other, and in doing so, chose the future of the kingdom. Choosing each other in the moonlit garden was one thing. Announcing it to the kingdom was another beast entirely. We agreed to wait, to build our partnership in the quiet spaces between royal duties, letting trust and understanding deepen away from prying eyes. But in a castle, few things remain quiet for long. The first challenge came from the council. With Vane gone, a power vacuum had formed, filled by anxious traditionalists and ambitious reformers. At a council meeting called to discuss the new healer apprenticeship program, my program, the old guard mounted their resistance. Your Majesty, Lord Braden, a man whose family traced its line back to the first Wolf Kings, intoned, while Aid Vance's dedication is commendable, placing Omegas in positions of authority over Alphas in the healing halls disrupts the natural harmony. It invites discord. And Omega's strength is in support, in nurture, not in command. Before Kaylin could respond, I found my voice. I stood, smoothing my simple blue dress. With respect, Lord Braden, what is more nurturing than saving a life? What is more supportive than mending a broken bone or curing a fever? The natural harmony you speak of allowed skilled hands to go unused while people suffered for lack of healers. This program seeks harmony of a different kind, the harmony of using every gift our people possess to strengthen the whole pack. I presented the figures I'd compiled, the number of preventable deaths in outlying territories, the success rates of healer stations that already utilize lower-rank personnel out of necessity. The logic was irrefutable. The reform passed, but the scowls around the table told me the ideological war had just begun. I was no longer just Kaylin's aide. I was the living embodiment of the change they feared. Rumors, of course, swirled about the nature of my relationship with the king. They were fed by our late nights working together, by the way his eyes followed me in a room. Celine's graceful departure added fuel to the fire. The rumor mill churned out tales of a cunning Omega seducing a grieving king, of shadowy ambition disguised as loyalty. The most dangerous rumor, however, came from outside. Nisha intercepted a message meant for a conservative noble. It spoke of the Forsaken Queen and whispered of a growing alliance among the old blood houses in the Southern Territories. They called themselves the Covenant of the Pure Blood. Their manifesto, a piece of hateful parchment, declared Kaylin bewitched and unfit to rule, and called for restoration of the natural order. My name was circled in red ink. "They're using you as the catalyst," Theron said grimly, spreading the document on Kaylin's desk. "A focal point for all their fear and rage. Declaring you queen would be the spark that ignites a rebellion." Kaylin's face was stone. "Then let it burn. I will not hide her. I will not ask her to shrink back into the shadows she came from. Your Majesty, I said, my mind racing, a spark needs tinder. What if we remove the tinder? Both men looked at me. The southern houses are not united, I continued, pointing to the list of names on the covenant. The House of Marlowe feuds with the House of Graves over water rights. Lord Kane is bankrupt, desperate for coin, not ideology. They are united only by their fear of change. What if we address their fears, not by surrendering, but by offering a new vision, one that includes them, but on new terms? A slow smile spread across Kalen's face. It was a warrior smile, seeing a new path to victory. Divide and redeem, he murmured. We invite them, not to a council, but to a summit of their own at neutral ground. We listen, and we offer them a choice. Be part of the new kingdom with their honor intact, or be remembered as traitors who chose the past over their people. It was a gamble. It could be a trap, but it was proactive, not reactive. The southern summit was arranged at the ancient Stonewatch Fortress on the border between territories. The air there was thick with mistrust. Kalen went with a minimal guard, a show of faith. I insisted on going, not as a hidden advisor, but openly. If I am the symbol of what they hate, let them see the symbol is not a monster. Let them see I am just a woman who loves her kingdom. The meeting was tense. The Southern lords, led by the blustering Lord Graves, listed grievances, couched in tradition and warnings of chaos. Kalen listened, truly listened. Then he spoke. He spoke not of submission, but of shared prosperity. He offered infrastructure projects for their neglected lands, fair trade agreements, seats on a newly formed Lords' Assembly with real power. He addressed their fear of lost status by offering a new kind of honor, the honor of building rather than merely inheriting. Then he gestured to me. And you fear the influence of Alara Vance. You see her as a threat to your world. Look at her. She is the daughter of a healer. She was cast aside by the old ways, and yet with no title, no army, only her conscience and her courage, she saved your king and helped uncover a treason that would have plunged us all into war. She does not seek to take anything from you. She seeks to add her mind, her skills, to the strength of our pack. That is the future. Not less for some, but more for all. I stood, meeting the hostile, curious, and wary eyes in the room. I do not wish to be your queen because I crave a crown. I wish to see a kingdom where a child's worth is not decided at birth by rank or gender, but is allowed to grow from their own heart and hands. I believe that kingdom is stronger. I believe that is a kingdom worth fighting for, together. There was a long, heavy silence. Then Lord Marlowe, the rival of Graves, cleared his throat. The irrigation project for the Southern Valley, the plans are solid? The tension broke into negotiation. Not all were swayed. Lord Graves and a handful of hardliners left, their faces thunderous, but the majority stayed. The covenant was broken before it could truly form. We had won without drawing a sword, by offering a better dream. On the journey back, riding beside Kalen, he looked at me, his eyes full of a quiet awe. You were magnificent, he said simply. We were, I corrected, smiling. The path ahead was still fraught, but for the first time I felt we weren't just standing in it, we were learning to guide the wind.